Have you ever wondered how a simple return to the past can unearth memories that have shaped who we are, and even open wounds that we thought were healed? Upon returning to his hometown, Lorenzo finds himself face to face with a piece of the past that he believed was buried forever. On a journey of reunion and rediscovery, every street corner and familiar face revives not only memories, but deep and unexpected revelations that lead him to question everything he has built away from his roots. The soft light of dawn hangs over the hills as Lorenzo drives through the streets he has long left behind. That day, he approaches the small town for the annual family event, which his mother organizes with great enthusiasm. Every detail of the surrounding landscape brings back fragments of a childhood that Lorenzo had abandoned in search of a grand future. The fields, the simple houses, the small shops by the side of the road, everything seems to echo memories of what he had built so far away. As he enters the city center, Lorenzo notices the slowed pace, the air still imbued with calm and nostalgia. The few cars driving around, the children laughing on street corners, and the old people sitting on benches seem to be pieces of a puzzle that he had tried to leave behind for years. However, this year's family event no longer appears to him as a simple obligation. This time, he feels a kind of restlessness, as if the return to the past brings something beyond the family routines. At the top of the hill, Lorenzo's childhood home stands out among the vegetation. He slows down the car when he sees the old peeling facade still marked by time. The house, humble in appearance, is home to memories of times that taught him the meaning of simplicity before the corporate world shaped his life. He parks and looks at the house, lost for a moment in the contrast between the simplicity of those walls and the grandeur of his current life. In the backyard, some family members are already exchanging greetings and laughter as they prepare the table. Lorenzo notices the familiar faces, family and childhood friends, figures who remain in the same routines he had abandoned. He greets his mother with a hug, and she immediately gives him a look of satisfaction at seeing him there again. Lorenzo disguises a smile, feeling a weight, as he realizes that even at a distance, his family's expectations of him are still as present as before. The conversation at the table follows a rhythm that Lorenzo had almost forgotten. The aroma of coffee and fresh bread spreads through the room, and every sentence exchanged brings up little stories, situations experienced throughout the year, such as the problems with the old roof of the house or the new plantation in the field next door. Lorenzo takes part in the conversations, but his thoughts wander back to the time when those same stories filled his days. He feels a strange sense of displacement, as if he himself were a visitor in a place he once called home. In the middle of a break in the conversation, one of his uncles catches his eye, commenting on his success and life in the big city. Lorenzo responds with quick sentences, a restrained smile on his face, without allowing the conversation to go any deeper. He avoids sharing too much about his routine, keeping his focus on enjoying the moment. Despite his financial success, Lorenzo realizes that, in this place, his personal fulfillment carries much less weight than he imagined. After coffee, Lorenzo walks around the house and revisits rooms that seem to have stopped in time. The hallway, where he and his cousins used to play until they got tired, the small window that offers a view of the horizon, the backyard, where he often fantasized about the future. Everything there carries an almost uncomfortable familiarity, a vivid reminder of the road he chose to travel and the parts of himself he left behind. Lorenzo goes out into the street and, as he crosses the city center, he comes face to face with the old cinema where he and his friends used to meet on Sunday afternoons. The worn facade, with its weathered signs, seems to reflect something that, in a way, he too has lost. He looks at the building, as if trying to recover a piece of the past, but the facade remains impassive, like a memory that no longer fits completely into his current life. The distant sound of laughter and conversation invades the air, And Lorenzo realizes that, in fact, everything around him seems to want to remind him of a simplicity that he himself has abandoned. In the distance, he finds a square full of children playing, people sitting on benches, and he realizes how the city remains faithful to its own routines. In his search for fulfillment and recognition, he has moved away from everything that once represented security and identity. Feeling somewhat of a stranger in the town where he grew up, Lorenzo decides to continue exploring the place before returning for the family reunion. The event is approaching, and as Lorenzo crosses the main square, he recognizes the melody of a band playing an old local song. He stops for a moment and closes his eyes, absorbing the sound, as if reconnecting with a piece of his own soul that has remained there, buried beneath the layers of success and ambition he has built up. Every detail of that city now seems to amplify a feeling of nostalgia, mixed with regret. Lorenzo realizes that the family event brings back more than just memories. It gives him back parts of a life that until then he had considered complete and full. The distant sound of laughter, the aroma of coffee, and the familiar faces carry a weight that he perhaps wasn't prepared to face on his return. The streets of the center remain silent as Lorenzo walks. He feels the slight chill of the morning and a certain emptiness in the shadows of the past that surround him. The modest buildings display the same facades he saw as a child, albeit with signs of time and the life the city led. On his way, Lorenzo comes across a local restaurant where he used to have lunch with childhood friends at weekends. A sudden nostalgia leads him inside, and he chooses a table near the window from where he can see the subtle movement of the streets. A waiter approaches, offering him the menu and a polite smile. Lorenzo places a simple order, remembering the dishes he always shared with his friends on afternoons when their main concern was deciding where to play soccer after the meal. While he waits, he watches the sidewalk and the movement of a few people passing by. Each face and gesture seems to echo something familiar and at the same time distant, like a memory that insists on surfacing but offers no comfort. Among the passers-by, one figure catches Lorenzo's eye, a woman sitting on the ground, wearing dirty clothes and looking lost. She's hunched over, her hands resting on her knees, her head down, almost as if she's running away from her own gaze. He immediately feels uncomfortable, as if that figure is bringing out something he would rather not recognize. Lorenzo tries to ignore it, focusing on the plate on the table, but her image remains, like a shadow that won't disappear if he just looks away. A second, closer look makes Lorenzo notice familiar features in the woman. Her messy hair, slim features, and posture. Everything about her is reminiscent of an image he knows well, but which time has changed. As if drawn by an inevitable force, he continues to watch her, waiting for her to raise her face and confirm what his instincts already sense. In a sudden movement, the woman lifts her gaze, and Lorenzo finds himself caught in those tired but unmistakable eyes. The realization explodes inside him with an almost physical intensity. The woman on the sidewalk is Amelia, his childhood friend and the first love he had never forgotten. The initial shock makes him lose his breath. It's as if a hurricane of memories is sweeping through his soul, carrying the weight of a past he had neglected. Amelia, without immediately recognizing Lorenzo, lowers her head again. For him, however, recognition becomes inevitable, and he feels he has to do something. His heart racing, Lorenzo gets up and quickly pays for his lunch, walking out of the restaurant towards her. His hands are sweating, and his gaze doesn't waver for a second, as if he feared that she might disappear if he lost the visual connection. Stopping in front of her, Lorenzo tries to contain his trembling voice as he calls her name. Amelia lifts her gaze once more, watching him with some confusion. Her tired face reveals no immediate reaction. He observes the effect of time on her, the wear and tear on her delicate features, and the weariness that her expression conveys. Lorenzo feels a tightness in his chest as he realizes that life has been extremely hard on Amelia. the same girl who had once shared laughter and dreams with him under the city stars. Unable to contain his curiosity and desperation for answers, Lorenzo stoops to her level and tries to start a conversation. He talks about the past, mentions memories they both shared, moments that defined their connection. Little by little, Amelia begins to put the pieces together, to understand who is in front of her, and Lorenzo notices the change in her expression when his name becomes familiar. Her eyes reflect a mixture of surprise and bitterness, as if Lorenzo were a ghost from a time when her hope still existed. She looks at the well-dressed, confident man and hesitates when she recognizes in him the boy with whom she had shared so many moments. Amelia looks away, as if she doesn't want to be seen in her fragility, but Lorenzo insists in no hurry, willing to listen to her. After a prolonged pause, she surrenders to Lorenzo's presence, albeit with some discomfort. Amelia speaks briefly, mentioning events in her life that surprise him, moments that demonstrate a sequence of challenges she has faced. Lorenzo listens to every word, feeling guilt well up in his heart. He, who had achieved so much, had never imagined the weight of the difficulties that had marked his friend's life. Amelia speaks in a low, halting voice, mentioning her mother's death, the loss of her job, and finally, her estrangement from everything she knew. Lorenzo, in silence, realizes that this reunion represents much more than a memory. He is witnessing the impact of the choices he made, of the paths they took in opposite directions, and realizes that the prosperity he had achieved had been of no benefit to her, who had welcomed him in times of doubt, but who now looks at him with suspicion. In an almost instinctive gesture, Lorenzo offers to help, but Amelia hesitates, refusing the offer. Her pride shows even in her vulnerability, and he senses the chasm that their choices have created. Even so, Lorenzo insists, wanting to do something for her, aware that this meeting cannot be reduced to a passing conversation. He promises to find a way to support her, and Amelia, after some time, agrees to talk to him again, although she still shows reservations. As he walks away, Lorenzo realizes that his encounter with Amelia has left a deep mark. He walks through the streets without clearly seeing the way ahead, lost in thoughts that bring back the essence of what he had always tried to forget. The reunion with Amelia is not just a memory, but a mirror that reveals his own omissions and choices, forcing him to reflect on the life he has built and what he really values. Lorenzo, his heart still pounding from the intensity of his encounter with Amelia, tries to organize his thoughts as he walks through the quiet streets of the city. Each step seems to echo the choices he has made, the life he has built, and above all, the consequences his ambitions have imposed on the people around him. He realizes the stark contrast between the success he has achieved and the emptiness that now sets in when he finds Amelia in such a difficult situation. At that moment, her image becomes a reflection of what he has always tried to avoid in his quest for success. On returning to the hotel room where he is staying, Lorenzo sits in silence, immersed in the memories of the past. He closes his eyes and visualizes scenes from his childhood, when he and Amelia spent hours together, sharing secrets and dreams. He remembers the promise he once made to never leave her behind, a promise he clearly didn't keep. Lorenzo feels an anguish he has never experienced before, as if the weight of years of conquests and estrangement is suddenly collapsing on him. Still shaken, Lorenzo mentally reviews the path he had traveled up to that point, questioning the decisions he had made, his achievements, his fame, and the prestige he has built up through the corporate empire he now manages. All this now seems insignificant in the face of Amelia's reality. He comes to see his success as something cold and distant, empty of meaning, when confronted with the real lives of the people who were once part of who he was. That same evening, Lorenzo reviews documents from his company, looking for details about recent investments they have made. During the analysis, he discovers that some of their properties in the city include residential buildings that, at one point, received eviction orders to facilitate renovations and rent increases. Lorenzo notices the name of one of these buildings, the same one where Amelia lived with her mother until her death. A feeling of unease overwhelms him, and he realizes the indirect effect his decisions have had on people like Amelia. He hadn't even questioned the impact of his actions on lives that, like hers, had found no alternative but street shelters. The revelation provokes a deeper and more painful reflection. Lorenzo then realizes that his own company, and he, as a consequence, has contributed to pushing Amelia into a condition of extreme vulnerability. Every decision he has made to grow and expand his business now feels like an irreversible weight on his shoulders. For the first time, he sees that, in his eagerness to conquer the market, he has sacrificed something essential: empathy for ordinary people and the responsibility to preserve his roots. At dawn, Lorenzo decides to talk to his partners. He grabs his car keys and heads to the headquarters of one of his companies in the neighboring town, where he has arranged an urgent meeting. The journey seems longer than usual, and every kilometer becomes a reminder of the choices that, without realizing it, have shaped a trajectory that he no longer recognizes as his own. When he arrives, he is greeted by his partners, businessmen who share his vision of growth and profit above all else. Sitting in a large meeting room, Lorenzo observes the attentive faces of each of his partners. He reveals his desire to implement a policy of social responsibility, arguing that his position of power should now serve as a support to reverse some of the impact they have had on communities. However, his words meet with immediate resistance. One of the partners interrupts him, reminding him that the company's purpose has always been profitability and maximizing profits, something that, until that moment, Lorenzo had never questioned. Lorenzo, faced with the reactions, realizes how far his partners are from the principles that are now beginning to emerge in his own heart. He sees in each of their eyes the same blind ambition that once guided him. The words of one of the partners, who tells him that sentimentality should not interfere with his business decisions, resonate like an echo of his own past beliefs. At that moment, Lorenzo finds himself torn between the person he has become and the person he believed himself to be. The debate intensifies, and Lorenzo exposes the impact of corporate decisions on real lives. He talks about Amelia, the loss she faced, the vulnerability of those who need support rather than more obstacles. His every argument seeks an empathetic response from the partners, but what he gets are incredulous looks and words that refute his intention. One of the partners firmly reminds him that Lorenzo's position in the company is due precisely to his commitment to profit and productivity. He listens, but decides to maintain his position. The return to the past and the reunion with Amelia have brought a new perspective, something he can no longer ignore. The meeting ends in a stalemate. Lorenzo feels fatigue building up, but at the same time, a kind of determination begins to form. He realizes that he may have to give up everything he has built in order to correct what he considers to be a profound mistake. After the meeting with his partners, Lorenzo returns to his hometown with a different purpose than the one that brought him there in the first place. The family event, which once symbolized an annual obligation, now represents the starting point for a possible redemption. On the way back, Lorenzo makes plans to meet Amelia again, willing to try to reverse what, for him, now seems inevitable. He thinks about ways to turn one of his company's properties into a safe space, a shelter for people in vulnerable situations where they could start again. Amelia, with her experience and knowledge of the streets, could take an active role, helping those who, like her, still face the harsh reality of life on the streets. He imagines the shelter as a place of welcome and dignity, a space where people would find learning opportunities and support to rebuild their lives. Images of Amelia involved in the project pop into his mind, and Lorenzo feels that this is the right path. He promises himself that, even if it means giving up his comfortable position as a successful businessman, he will do what he can to reverse the decisions that have taken him away from what really matters. Back in the city, Lorenzo is faced with the challenge of convincing Amelia to trust him. She, who had lost so much and faced immense difficulties, now carries the resistance of someone who no longer believes in empty promises. He prepares for his next conversation with her, aware that he will need not just words, but actions to demonstrate that his intention is true. Lorenzo realizes that by opening this door, he is not only trying to help Amelia and others in similar conditions, but also to rescue himself. His desire for transformation now extends to the meaning of his success and to building something that ultimately has a greater purpose. He realizes that by taking in those whom society ignores, he is also taking in parts of himself that he left out on his climb to the top. The new path carries no guarantees, but Lorenzo feels he has to walk it. He imagines the future with the shelter in full operation, Amelia by his side, and the possibility of rebuilding his life with the support of values that he had ignored for a long time. The vision encourages him and pushes him to move forward, prepared to face whatever comes his way, determined to realize a new form of success based on compassion and on recovering the roots he once abandoned. Lorenzo walks through the city to the square where he last met Amelia. Determination drives him, and he undertakes to find a way to make Amelia trust him again. When he arrives, he sees her across the street, sitting in the same spot. Her countenance conveys a mixture of sadness and tiredness, but Lorenzo approaches her and greets her, respecting her space, but making clear his desire to help. Amelia observes Lorenzo cautiously, as if assessing the true meaning behind his words. He bends down, looks her in the eye, and explains that he wants to build something important, a project in which he would play a leading role. Without rushing, Lorenzo describes the idea of transforming one of his properties into a shelter that offers opportunities and security for those in vulnerable situations. He mentions that, with her support, the project would gain significance, as her experience would give authenticity to the plan. Amelia hesitates, and he realizes her distrust. She mentions that she has heard promises before, and her voice reveals the weight of the disappointments she has accumulated. Lorenzo stands firm, saying that this time she won't just have to take his word for it, she'll have a position of trust, where her decisions and suggestions will shape the shelter. He invites her to see the space, and, after a while in silence, she accepts. The two of them walk together to the building he has designated for the project. The worn facade hides the possibility of a new beginning, but Lorenzo reveals that with a few renovations and improvements, the place could be transformed into a decent shelter. As they enter, Amelia walks through the empty corridors, observing every detail. Lorenzo notices her expression gradually changing, and the initial disbelief giving way to a spark of hope. He watches as she explores the place and imagines each environment adapted to welcome people and offer a safe space. Amelia, for the first time, shares some ideas about how she would like the shelter to work. Lorenzo listens attentively, picking up on her every suggestion, realizing that she envisions that space as a refuge where dignity and respect prevail. She suggests that the shelter offer, in addition to a place to sleep, a learning and training program where people could acquire practical skills and increase their chances of reintegration. Lorenzo is impressed to hear the depth of her ideas and realizes that Amelia has a vision that can transform the shelter into something more than temporary. Her voice carries a passion that reveals the experience of someone who has lived the reality of the streets, but who still seeks hope for herself and others. Lorenzo proposes that she take on the role of project coordinator, and Amelia, surprised by the invitation, hesitates. She mentions that her past hasn't prepared her for such a position, but he assures her that he believes in her ability, saying that no one knows better the needs of those in vulnerability. With eyes full of doubt, but also of new strength, Amelia accepts the invitation and thanks him for the opportunity. They start work on the building the next day. Lorenzo hires a team to carry out the renovations, but it is Amelia who oversees every detail, ensuring that the project follows its original purpose. She determines that the environment should be welcoming, with living rooms, rest areas, and a space where people can learn new trades. Each choice is based on the needs she observes in those who live on the street, and Lorenzo sees her commitment and dedication in every decision. Little by little, the city begins to notice the movement in the building. Some intrigued residents approach to ask about the project, and Lorenzo takes it upon himself to explain the idea of a shelter and reintegration space. He emphasizes that it is a commitment to offer dignity and support to those who have lost everything. Amelia also takes part in these conversations, looking serious and confident, sharing her vision with those who ask. Listening to her story, many realize that the project goes beyond a simple social initiative. It is, for Amelia, the chance to transform her own story into something bigger. As the days go by, the bond between Lorenzo and Amelia grows stronger. He admires her courage and realizes the positive impact she has on the people around her. Amelia, on the other hand, begins to see Lorenzo as someone willing to make amends and dedicate himself to a cause that truly matters. At each stage of the project, the two share ideas, solve problems, and overcome challenges. The respect between them grows, and Lorenzo feels that he has finally found a purpose that goes beyond financial success. Challenges arise, and Lorenzo finds himself under pressure from some of the people in his business team who still keep in touch with him. One of his main partners approaches him in a phone call, questioning his dedication to the project and suggesting that he reevaluate his priorities. Lorenzo, however, decides to ignore the pressure and says that his choice is made. He no longer sees any point in giving up something that for him represents a personal rebirth and the chance to reconnect with his own humanity. Amelia, realizing the difficulties Lorenzo faces in keeping the shelter running, approaches him and encourages him to keep going. She understands the internal struggle he faces, but assures him that every effort is worth it. For her, the shelter represents a new perspective, not just for her, but for everyone who will find a fresh start there. Lorenzo feels that, with Amelia's support, he has the strength to face the criticism and continue with the project. The opening of the shelter is approaching, and Lorenzo organizes a ceremony to celebrate the start of activities. He invites local residents, friends, and even some former partners, although he knows that many of them view the project with skepticism. On the day of the event, Amelia prepares to give a speech, something she hesitates to do, but Lorenzo encourages her, saying that there is no one better than her to express the essence of the project. In front of the audience, Amelia shares a little of her story, talking about her experience on the streets and the importance of receiving support in times of difficulty. Her words are full of emotion, and she sincerely conveys the value of offering opportunities to those who have lost almost everything. The audience listens in silence, and Lorenzo watches with pride, seeing in her the strength that has always existed, but which is now becoming an inspiration to others. At the end of the ceremony, Lorenzo and Amelia received the support of several residents who recognized the relevance of the shelter to the community. Many thank them for the initiative, and some even offer to help as volunteers. Lorenzo realizes that the project, as well as being a shelter, now represents a bridge between people from different backgrounds who come together to create something transformative. That same day, after everyone has left, Lorenzo and Amelia remain in the shelter, observing the place they have helped to build. He feels that there, alongside her, he has found a genuine purpose, something he had always sought but never achieved in business. Amelia, looking at him, smiles with gratitude, and Lorenzo understands that the project is more than a shelter. It is a shared redemption where each of them finds the strength to move on. With the shelter up and running, Lorenzo and Amelia know the road ahead won't be easy. However, they feel ready to face every challenge that arises. For them, the project is no longer just an initiative. It is a commitment they have made to each other, to the city, and above all to the past, which they are now turning into something positive. With the shelter up and running and the community increasingly involved, Lorenzo and Amelia's project is growing, bringing new challenges and learning opportunities. The weeks following the inauguration event show the impact the shelter is having on the lives of people who, like Amelia, are in vulnerable situations. Men and women come to the shelter looking for a fresh start, and each of them brings stories of overcoming, loss, and the hope of a second chance. Amelia dedicates herself intensely to her role as coordinator of the shelter. Every day, she welcomes new visitors and takes the initiative to listen to each story, offering words of encouragement and, whenever possible, a hug of comfort. Lorenzo notices the care and compassion she shows and observes her ability to transform the space into a welcoming and safe place. She suggests integration and training activities, offering craft classes, basic computer skills, and even group therapy sessions, something that for many represents a chance to share their pain and find strength in similar experiences. Lorenzo, inspired by Amelia's commitment, decides to get even more involved, following the day-to-day life of the shelter and taking part in the activities. He takes on the responsibility of looking for financial support, partnerships, and volunteers who can help maintain the project. The connection between him and Amelia deepens, and Lorenzo comes to see her as a soul partner, someone who challenges him to be better and who transforms the reality around him with courage and empathy. Together with her, he begins to reframe the concept of success. One morning, Lorenzo receives a call from a former partner who insists on talking about the future of the company. Although he has cut ties with his former partners, he realizes that the call brings up issues that he still needs to resolve. The ex-partner questions him about the radical changes in Lorenzo's life and warns of the risk of bankruptcy if he continues to prioritize a project with no financial return. Lorenzo listens but remains firm. He defends the relevance of the shelter and sets out a vision of a future where he can be successful by helping people rather than accumulating wealth. Amelia realizes the emotional impact the conversation has on Lorenzo and supports him, showing him that he now represents a new perspective for his own life and for everyone who depends on that space. She encourages him to believe in the purpose that unites them, saying that the value of the work they do goes beyond any financial gain. With this confidence, Lorenzo commits himself to moving forward, driven by the conviction that the shelter represents more than just a social project. It is a redemption, a higher calling. The city is beginning to see the fruits of their dedication. The shelter receives a growing number of residents who arrive in search of shelter and support. Over time, Lorenzo and Amelia hear stories of people who have found jobs, rebuilt relationships with their families, and even started small businesses after visiting the shelter. These transformations reinforce the importance of the work they do, and Lorenzo feels that each individual success means a step forward in his own journey of reparation. At one of the weekly meetings Lorenzo holds to discuss strategies for growing the project, Amelia suggests creating a support program for former residents of the shelter. She proposes building an accompaniment network where they offer emotional and practical support to those who have left the shelter and are in the process of reintegrating. Lorenzo supports the idea, and together they begin to structure the program, inviting former residents to become mentors and inspire others with their experiences. The mentoring program, led by Amelia, becomes one of the shelter's biggest differentials. The overcoming stories of former residents echo through the city, and many people begin to look at the shelter with respect and admiration. Lorenzo and Amelia realize that the project they started has taken on a life of its own, becoming a movement that doesn't just offer shelter, but promotes real reintegration and appreciation of individuals. The emotional impact of this movement also falls on Lorenzo, who sees the power of small actions and human connections in restoring dignity. However, the project's success also attracts the attention of local figures, including businessmen who see the shelter as a threat to the region's elitist image. Some voices begin to question the presence of the shelter and consider it a problem for the city's reputation. Certain shopkeepers and members of the local elite approach Lorenzo, suggesting that he close down the project or move it to a more secluded area where it won't disturb the residents. He listens to the criticism but rejects the idea, determined to keep the shelter where it is most needed. When Amelia hears about the pressure Lorenzo is under, she reaffirms her commitment to the project and encourages him to stand firm. She understands that by facing these obstacles, they reaffirm the greater purpose of the work they do. Lorenzo feels that alongside Amelia, he finds the strength to resist external pressures and continue building the project based on the values that sustain it. Together, they become symbols of resistance and transformation for the city, inspiring others to contribute and recognize the value of the shelter. The project continues to expand, and Lorenzo realizes that the physical structure of the shelter can no longer cope with the number of people arriving. He and Amelia start planning to build an extension, where they could offer more beds and learning spaces. They organize fundraising events, and Lorenzo is surprised to see that the community is mobilizing to support the initiative. People who were initially suspicious of the shelter now contribute and recognize the importance of investing in social change. Between fundraising events, Lorenzo and Amelia share moments of reflection. He confesses that he never imagined he would find so much fulfillment in a job that doesn't make him any financial profit. Amelia, with a smile, comments that true wealth is not found in money, but in the bonds they build and the lives they touch. Lorenzo feels that with Amelia, he has found a form of love that transcends any previous concept of success. The two grow closer, strengthening their commitment to move forward together, not just as partners in the project, but as life partners. The atmosphere of support and solidarity continues to grow, and the shelter becomes a space for meetings and stories that connect people from different backgrounds. Lorenzo and Amelia's project goes beyond the local impact, and their work arouses interest in other cities. Lorenzo begins to receive invitations to speak about the shelter's trajectory and the importance of social responsibility. By sharing his experience, he inspires other entrepreneurs and shows that success can coexist with compassion. In one of these meetings, Lorenzo mentions Amelia's trajectory, recognizing her importance at every stage of the project. He says that without her vision and strength, the shelter would never have achieved what it does today. Hearing his words, Amelia feels a deep emotion as she understands that her story has become a symbol of hope and overcoming for others. As the project reaches new heights, Lorenzo and Amelia decide to get married in a simple ceremony at the shelter itself. They invite friends, family, and former residents to celebrate their love and the work they have built together. On the day of the wedding, the shelter is filled with flowers, laughter, and joy. Amelia wears a simple but beautiful dress and walks towards Lorenzo under the emotional gaze of everyone watching. He welcomes her with a sincere smile, and together they exchange vows of love and partnership, reaffirming the commitment they share with the project and the future they envision. The ceremony turns into an unforgettable moment, where Lorenzo and Amelia's union celebrates not only their love for each other, but the impact of two lives dedicated to something greater. The guests applaud, and Lorenzo and Amelia realize that they have built a family there that goes beyond blood ties. The shelter, which once represented the beginning of a journey of personal redemption, now symbolizes a legacy that they intend to expand and strengthen. After the ceremony and the celebration, Lorenzo and Amelia dedicate their full focus to expanding the shelter. The community mobilizes in a surprising way, with volunteers offering help in different areas and local businesses collaborating with donations. The project begins to gain recognition, and the town, once fearful, now embraces the initiative as a symbol of unity. Lorenzo sees in the eyes of each resident the reflection of the trust and hope that he and Amelia have built together, and he feels that each new supporter represents a victory on his path to transformation. Amelia is deeply involved in the administration, dedicating herself with determination to planning the new stages of the project. She organizes weekly meetings with the shelter's residents, where she leads sharing sessions and activities that strengthen their self-esteem. Many open up about their painful experiences, and Lorenzo observes with admiration her ability to welcome their stories and at the same time inspire courage. He understands that Amelia represents more than a coordinator. She becomes the bridge that allows people to trust in life and their own potential again. In the midst of the shelter's new demands, Lorenzo and Amelia begin to face resistance from groups who criticize the project's growth. Certain local businessmen, concerned about the city's image, try to put pressure on them to limit their activities or relocate the shelter to a more remote area. Lorenzo and Amelia, aware of the value of the work they do, stand firm, determined to face any resistance that may arise. They call public meetings to explain the positive impact of the shelter, inviting people from the city to see the facilities and the reintegration activities. Little by little, the community realizes that the shelter offers more than support. It strengthens the social structure itself, providing opportunities for citizens to get involved in a greater purpose. Opinion in the city begins to lean in favor of the project, and Lorenzo receives invitations to speak about the work elsewhere. He accepts a few invitations and shares the experience, highlighting the importance of initiatives that promote dignity and hope. During these meetings, Lorenzo mentions Amelia's trajectory, saying that the project would not have succeeded without her direct involvement. He speaks of the strength she has shown in transforming the past into a path of healing and purpose, inspiring others to believe in the ability to overcome. Amelia listens to Lorenzo's words with emotion, feeling that her story transcends her own difficulties and now represents a symbol of renewal for many people. However, Lorenzo realizes that the growth of the project requires a more organized structure and decides to look for new partnerships to ensure the sustainability of the shelter. He contacts entrepreneurs who share similar values and presents the impact the shelter has on the city. Many show interest and offer support, and Lorenzo sees the possibility of expanding the model to other regions. The idea of opening new shelters comes as a challenge, but Amelia encourages him, saying that more people could benefit from having access to opportunities for a fresh start. Lorenzo and Amelia dedicate themselves intensely to planning, dividing up responsibilities, and working hand in hand to ensure that the shelter's model inspires other similar projects. They organize training and workshops to train professionals, and Lorenzo sees that the movement they started is growing stronger with every step. He feels that the project, once a local initiative, now represents an example of responsibility and humanity, and Amelia agrees, saying that they have the chance to multiply the impact they have created. As time goes by, Lorenzo and Amelia observe the transformation of the many lives that pass through the shelter. They learn about the success stories of former residents who have found jobs, started their own businesses, or reconnected with family members. These stories serve as fuel for both of them, and they devote special time to talking to those who have left the shelter and are facing the challenge of starting life again outside the protected space. The mentoring sessions foster an environment of ongoing support, and Lorenzo realizes the importance of maintaining these bonds even after the residents have been reintegrated. Amelia, with her natural empathy, keeps in regular contact with the former residents, checking on their needs and offering help whenever possible. She organizes regular meetings where former residents share their achievements and challenges, creating a network of support and inspiration. Lorenzo observes the power of this cycle of new beginnings, where each person who overcomes a challenge becomes, in turn, an example of perseverance for the shelter's new residents. He feels that the continuity of the project offers a lasting purpose, and Amelia reinforces that each story of overcoming becomes a motivation for others. Daily work at the shelter requires dedication and resilience, and Lorenzo and Amelia face difficulties in maintaining operations and meeting new demands. Some setbacks arise, but they both support each other, finding strength in the partnership they have built. Lorenzo realizes that the project, as well as transforming the lives of the residents, strengthens the bond between him and Amelia, and each challenge they overcome together consolidates the love and respect they share. He feels that alongside her, he has found a purpose that sustains not only the shelter, but also their relationship. Over time, the project gains national recognition, and Lorenzo receives proposals to expand the initiative to other regions. He and Amelia discuss the possibility with caution, recognizing the responsibility that expansion requires. They decide to visit some interested cities where they study the feasibility of implementing the shelter model and adapting it to local needs. Amelia stresses the importance of maintaining the essence of the project and suggests including programs aimed at training and generating income, something that will strengthen local communities in a sustainable way. Lorenzo follows her dedication and admires her vision for the future of the project. He realizes that with Amelia, he can expand the shelter's impact and inspire other people to get involved in social causes. They organize a team to coordinate the expansion processes, and Lorenzo invests personal resources in building new shelters, committing himself to keeping the focus on the dignity and opportunity that the project offers. He feels that, alongside Amelia, he is walking a path of purpose and genuine fulfillment. In the midst of this expansion, Lorenzo and Amelia hear from former residents who have decided to become volunteers in the new shelters. They see this move as confirmation of the value of the work they do, and Lorenzo feels that their mission is reaching new heights. He and Amelia, as partners in life and purpose, realize that the essence of the project grows stronger as it impacts other lives, and each new initiative reinforces the certainty that the shelter represents a transformation that spreads beyond the original site. With each new shelter, Lorenzo and Amelia consolidate a support network that provides dignity and empowerment. They realize that true wealth does not lie in accumulating possessions, but in multiplying opportunities and promoting the autonomy of each individual. Together, they work with the certainty that the future holds new challenges, but also new achievements, and they share the conviction that the love they have cultivated and the project they have built represent the true meaning of a fulfilling life. In an intimate conversation with Lorenzo, Amelia says that she never imagined that her own story would become an instrument of transformation for so many people. He replies that the path they have chosen shows that every pain and every overcoming has a greater purpose, and that they have both come to a new understanding of what it means to start again. They look to the future with confidence and hope, certain that the work they do echoes in every life they touch. At the end of each day, Lorenzo and Amelia walk through the shelter together, exchanging words of encouragement and sharing moments of reflection. They know that they have built something that transcends their individual stories, and that the legacy they leave behind represents a milestone of solidarity and love. At every step, they feel they have found a place where they belong, and that the shelter, now part of their lives, symbolizes the destiny they have both chosen to share. Lorenzo and Amelia's shelter, now consolidated as a national benchmark in foster care and social reintegration, has reached a point of stability that allows the initiative to expand. The activities of the new shelters in neighboring towns are progressing, strengthening the support network they have created. With each visit, Lorenzo and Amelia see the real impact of the work they have started and feel that along the way, They have built not just a social project, but a real family that grows with each person they help. At the end of a long day of visits and planning, Lorenzo and Amelia return to the original shelter where it all began. They walk through the space, now full of laughter, encounters and stories of overcoming. The sound of conversations and the positive energy of the place fill the room with a welcoming warmth, reflecting the transformation that the space represents for so many. Lorenzo observes Amelia interacting with the residents and feels a deep admiration, as if her every gesture were an extension of what they have built together. She becomes the symbol of the courage and compassion that make the project thrive. Lorenzo approaches her and suggests that they both visit the old building where Amelia used to live, a place that for him now represents the starting point of the whole journey. Amelia agrees, and the two walk to the place, exchanging stories and memories of the past that connected them. When they arrive, they see the facade, worn by time but still full of meaning. Lorenzo, holding her hand, comments on how that point becomes a symbol of their new beginning and that of all the people who pass by the shelter. That evening, as they look at the building and reflect on the path they have chosen, Lorenzo and Amelia decide to plan a special event to celebrate the impact of the shelter and the new centers they have opened. They feel it's time to thank the community, the collaborators, and everyone who has been part of building this dream. They agree that the event will also serve as a milestone of transition, representing their desire to expand the work even further, taking the message of empathy and solidarity to other places. Over the next few days, Amelia and Lorenzo dedicate themselves to preparations, calling together former residents, volunteers, and partners for the celebration. They plan a ceremony that includes testimonies and stories of overcoming, something that will inspire everyone present. The town has responded enthusiastically to the invitation, and Lorenzo feels that the community's support grows stronger with every step they take. For him, the event represents confirmation of the commitment they have made, something that transcends the initial purpose and becomes a shared mission. On the night of the ceremony, the shelter is lit up with lanterns and flowers, and the air seems charged with expectation and emotion. People from different places and backgrounds gather, exchanging smiles and hugs. Lorenzo and Amelia circulate among the guests, greeting friends, partners, and former residents, now transformed into agents of change. The energy in the air reflects the dedication and love invested in the shelter, and Lorenzo feels that each face there represents a chapter in the story he and Amelia have written together. When the ceremony begins, Amelia stands in the center of the makeshift stage, surrounded by the watchful eyes of the community. She speaks in an assured and emotional voice, recounting her own journey and the path that took her from anonymity on the streets to leadership in the shelter. The audience follows in silence, absorbing every word. Amelia ends her speech by mentioning the importance of everyone who has dedicated themselves to the project, highlighting Lorenzo as someone who, alongside her, has turned a dream into reality. The emotion in her words touches every heart, and Lorenzo feels their commitment to the shelter grow even stronger. Lorenzo also takes the floor, thanking everyone who has supported the project and stating that the shelter represents the most important purpose of his life. He shares his desire to see the initiative reach even more people, carrying the message that human value goes beyond profit and that every individual deserves a chance to start again. He ends his speech by mentioning Amelia, acknowledging the strength and inspiration she has brought to the project and to his own heart. Applause echoes through the room, and Lorenzo feels that this moment represents a coronation for both of them. After the ceremony, Lorenzo and Amelia walk through the shelter among the guests, feeling connected to everyone and to every story of overcoming that is present there. Amelia holds his hand and, in a moment of confidence, says that their future looks brighter than she had ever dared to imagine. Lorenzo, looking at her, smiles and replies that he couldn't have chosen a better destiny. Together, they share a sense of fulfillment and love for the work they have done. The evening continues with conversations and exchanges of experiences, and Lorenzo realizes that the shelter, now recognized and supported by so many people, has finally become a work that is independent of him or Amelia. Together, they had built something self-sustaining, something that other people could take forward and expand. Amelia, standing next to him, realizes the same thing, and the two exchange a look of understanding. The shelter, once an isolated project, now represents an idea that echoes and inspires. At the end of the evening, Lorenzo and Amelia walk hand in hand through the place, absorbing the feeling of mission accomplished. They look at the shelter with affection, feeling that the place has become an extension of themselves. The building, which once housed so many stories of pain and overcoming, now stands as a monument of hope and rebirth. Lorenzo looks at Amelia and feels that with her, he has discovered a greater meaning, something that transcends the material and connects to the depths of the human soul. As Lorenzo and Amelia leave the shelter that night, they decide to dedicate their future to the commitment of multiplying what they have created. Together, they plan to visit other regions to start new shelter projects, bringing the message that the value of life is found in dignity and solidarity. They leave with the certainty that each step forward strengthens the purpose they have chosen to share. As they move on to the next challenge, Lorenzo and Amelia realize that true success is revealed in the impact that each choice has on the world around them. The love they have found along this journey becomes the foundation of everything they have built, and they continue with the confidence that together they can transform even more lives and build a legacy of compassion.